Okay, so WillE, I see, has uploaded a YouTube video titled, "Have we lost sight of what makes Classic classic?" And obviously, as of late, we are sort of deviating from the 2019 vision of Classic Vanilla WoW, no changes, because now we have Season of Discovery. It's a lot of changes. Classic TBC, Classic Wrath, they've run their course, and now we're heading towards Classic Cataclysm. A lot of people would say, Cataclysm is not Classic, I don't want it, okay? So I think this is actually a good conversation, WillE. Let's see where we go with this.
Later this year, Classic WoW will turn 5 years old. Can you imagine going back to day one of its release and telling someone where the game will be out right now? Yes.
Since Classic came out, I have gotten married and had 2 kids. That's 5 years. That's a long time, man. A lot can happen. Jeez.
It turns out we are going to be playing Cataclysm Classic eventually. You'd get laughed at by many. Back then, everything was so heavily no changes. We want the original hardcore MMO experience. And then along comes TBC and Wrath and, well, here we are. Or in regards to the Season of Discovery, imagine telling a Feral Alliance Druid player back then, there will be a future where people are literally begging for you to join their raids. You could have next to no gear and just auto-attacking cat form, but you have Wind Fury, so enjoy your permanent raid spot. Or telling Shaman players there will be a time in the future when they are playing the most dominant class in the game.
Real quick, I want to ask my live chat here. Yes or no? Would it be hard for you to go back and play 2019 Vanilla WoW No Changes after playing Season of Discovery? Like, would you miss all of your runes and your class updates? Everyone is saying no. No, it would not be hard. No, it would not be hard. That means a lot of you guys at some point are looking forward to 2019 Classic No Changes. Okay. Fresh wind, they say. The people are screaming.
Whilst warriors feel average in comparison. A lot's changed, that's for sure. What was that saying? You think you do, but you don't? We've even moved past that now, I feel like. We have had it, and now we want something else. Today's going to be a bit of a retrospective and thoughts type ramble video on the general state of the game as it currently stands on this big line going from Wrath to Cata, as well as seasonal servers, and of course the versions of WoW that most, but not all, have now left behind. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a platform that aims to equip you with the skills to forge a career in back-end development through interactive lessons and learning. Where it's unique is that it tracks progress and...
Real quick, in the professional coding or scripting environment, how important is a college degree? I feel like that might be a field where maybe people are saying, you know what, maybe a degree is not all that matters. Maybe we're willing to hire people to our business that actually don't have a degree, as long as they know what to do, right?
And achievements, much like an RPG with goals, experience, and leaderboards.
And it's gamified.
Boot.dev offers self-motivated individuals the tools to get fully on board with the Python and Go programming languages. It does this through hands-on learning.
You know the scary part, though? If you're a coder, maybe this is one of the first fields that AI is going to replace. I have no idea, but I could see it happening. I don't know.
Where you're going to be writing tons of your own code so that you can get a grasp of the fundamentals from the basics to more advanced lessons. On top of that, all content is free to view and watch in guest mode, and there's even a 30-day no questions asked refund policy. So even if you're just interested in checking out how Boot works and want to see more...
Do you think 10, 15 years from now, I'll be able to sit down in front of an AI command prompt and I'll be able to say, AI, I want you to script for me, create for me the best MMORPG ever made, and I want all of the male characters to be steroided up super muscle freaks, and all of the female characters to have giant boobs. And also I want it to be the best MMO of all time. Make it. Beep, 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 boop. And then it's the best MMO of all time. Wow. 15 years from now, that's the future.
More before you know if it's for you, there is very much an option to do that. Back-end development itself is a career with tons of potential, great earnings, often remote positions, and you can start working towards that today at your own pace. You can click the link in the description box and use my code WillE to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription that you choose. Many thanks to Boot.dev for the sponsor today. Let's get back to WoW. So I am a Cataclysm enjoyer. I've made a bunch of videos on the topic way before any thoughts of
I need to get this out of the way. I am a Cataclysm hater. I think they should cancel Classic Cataclysm, and they should double their investment, their developer time investment, into making SOD 2 times better. I think SOD is the proper path. Classic Cataclysm, waste of time. That's my take. I don't know, but you can disagree, that's fine, but that's my opinion.
Classic was ever possible, and even back then they were on the positive side and received a lot of positive feedback. But I also think it is where things start to noticeably change, and it's a time where WoW entered a new era, if you will. I've always put it like this: Vanilla and TBC and Wrath were the classics with their big talent trees, simpler gameplay, persistent old world, varied stats, and so on. Clatter, Mr. Pandaria, and WoD were the progressive expansions. Blizzard had hit it big with this whole MMO thing, bigger than they would have ever imagined, and by 2010 when Kata dropped, WoW was over 6 years old.
I'm going to say something that is also maybe incredibly controversial. A lot of people would call me a classic Andy. I reject that notion. I don't like that verbiage. I don't like that title. I am a classic supremacist. I think classic is the best version of WoW. In fact, I think really it's the only version of WoW that is worth playing. Seriously. I don't even really like TBC. I think TBC is not anywhere near as good as Vanilla. Wrath, nowhere near as good as Vanilla. Vanilla and sort of some of the versions of Vanilla. I would include SOD also. It takes place in the Vanilla world. It's vanilla-ish. It's way better than anything else. It's the best. It's the bee's knees. That's all I want.
Time to do big updates to core aspects of the game, reworking talent trees, harder and more varied content, focus on collections, and trimming that which was deemed unnecessary out of the game. The third era of WoW comes along, and it's the most divisive one: the temporary power expansions, Legion, BFA, and Shadowlands. In these games, we have our class templates kind of done, basically, but we're going to be adding new stuff throughout the expansion to make them interesting. This started off fine in Legion. We were coming off the back of WoD, and people wanted more stuff to do in the game. And Legion, whatever you think about it,
I think Legion, a lot of people remember Legion being super, super good, and I actually have to grant, I think the end of Legion was good. The beginning of Legion, when Legion launched, it was really, really bad. Legion was not good for the first, like, 6 months. The final 6 months, it was great. It was actually really good, but Legion had a really shitty start.
It had stuff to do, but people got very tired of this format by BFA, and in Shadowlands, yeah, people were absolutely done with it. Also, these expansions had a big focus on stuff to do to keep up. They wanted you to log in and do your checklist. Then along comes Dragonflight. We've got big talent trees back again. Blizzard rein in the weekly and monthly upkeep stuff, lots more collection content, more varied endgame progression paths, and so on. And the Wall Within is the start of a trio of expansions, so we'll see how it builds on Dragonflight. But the point is, Cataclysm is definitely the first big shift in how WoW progressed, and as such, people draw a line in the sand, and it is the...
In fact, I think still to this day, I think patch 4.0, it was like the Cataclysm pre-patch, I think that is the single biggest patch to this day that they ever launched. It had the most, and this is the patch, of course, where they rework the entire world. It's entirely new Azeroth, entirely new Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms.
The end of Classic for them.
A lot changed
I often read
overnight.
comments along the line of, I played Kata back in the day for a few months and it was bad, not going to be playing that again. And, well, is it time to feel old yet? Because Kata released 14 years ago. I'm just saying, perhaps after not having done something for 14 years, if you tried it again, you may have a different opinion, or not. Really, the game changed significantly the moment when the Dark Portal opened. Expansions were the single biggest turning point in World of Warcraft's history.
Guys, he has a point. We might get into Classic Cataclysm a couple months from now, and we might all say, oh, whoa, Cataclysm is actually the best version of WoW ever, and we were all too dumb to realize that 14 years ago. Oh! Cataclysm is awesome. It's the best version of all time. Probably not, but I guess it could be the case. You need to keep an open mind, but probably not. Let's go.
Before that, there was no concept of an old world or old content. Everything was as it always had been. You'd have
kind of funny. Like, I kind of agree, I kind of disagree. I remember in Classic Wrath, I was actually part of a guild. I had a level 60 twink in Classic Wrath, and I was in a vanilla WoW twink raiding guild. And this is in class, sorry, not Classic Wrath, in Wrath. This is Wrath in like 2009. I was part of a guild where a bunch of 60s, we turned off our XP, we were doing Molten Core, we were getting tribute buffs, we were farming Thunder Fury, we were doing Blackwing Lair in 2009. So that kind of proves the point that even in 2009 there were some people that were saying, I want to go back. I want to go back and play vanilla already in 2009.
Of your maximum level players in Stormwind and Orgrimmar, starting at level 1 would see you run into people all the time instead of just rushing to level cap to get to the current content. And honestly, there could have been a huge tornado in Westfall, and the Barons were split in two during TBC or Wrath, and I probably wouldn't have noticed because I just didn't have a reason to be there anymore. Expansions changed the old world a lot, but Kata came along and made it obvious. And when the change became apparent, it was too much at once for many players. And now I've replayed the original 3 expansions all the way through, done every raid, leveled every...
Well, the big problem is that all the new Cataclysm zones were way worse than the original Vanilla WoW zones. They were worse. They were downgrade, right? The mystery and sort of like very explorative, discovery-based journey that you had in the original Vanilla WoW zones were removed, and then you were put on this very homogenized conveyor belt leveling experience. You don't really need to explore or discover the mysteries or the secrets of the zones anymore, because now you just have a very linear quest chain. Every single zone has sort of like a story or a narrative, and it's very linear, and there's not a lot of brain power or thinking or mystique to it. And also, I have to say, this is sort of like an overlooked, but this is important to me, an overlooked point. The vanilla WoW zones are really, really cozy. You actually want to be in the zones. They're very relaxing. They're very cozy. In Cataclysm, the zones, everywhere you go, it's hectic. It's mayhem. It's the world is crumbling. Everything is on fire. Everything is destroyed. And I understand that's the lore. That's the story of the zones. Deathwing flew over and destroyed everything. But it's like, it leaves me as the player not really wanting to be in those zones, because they're just wrecked. Everything is just destroyed, and it's not really cozy. And so that's another small thing for me.
Class and, you know, played the game a fair amount. It's vanilla, which is the version of the game that stands out the most because it is not an expansion. If Blizzard
I don't want to be here, right? Look at the before and after here, right? Real quick.
And, you know, played the game a fair amount.
This is OG Barons. It's peaceful. It's cozy.
It's vanilla, which is the...
I don't know. This is maybe personal preference.
The version of the game that stands out the most because it is not an expansion. If Blizzard want to re-release, well, any expansion and call it classic, I mean, go for it. I've mentioned it in videos before, but people have started WoW at all points throughout its near 20-year history. Not every expansion may have had the same growth, but each will have its own merits that a certain amount of people will want to go back and see. Classic can really be anything that's re-released as it was back then, so people can go and see how it was back then. Well, kind of anyways. This has been changing as Blizzard as well as the player base are getting more open to altering or adding to the current Classic expansion. I still reckon one day we're going to have Legion Classic 2. And yes, this means WoD Classic will exist too.
There most certainly is like a breaking point where, I don't know if this will happen, but you could conceive, if so few people are playing Classic Kata or Classic Mop, like if there's not enough people playing those versions of Classic to justify further development or further dev time on future Classic expansions, then I think they probably would cancel them. Don't you think? So let me give you a hyperbolic example. Let's say Classic Kata comes out, and within 6 months, there's only like 20,000 people in the entire world playing Classic Cataclysm. It's a complete flop. It's a total failure. Would they continue? Would they then move on to Classic Mop? I think probably not. Just because it's like, it's not worth the dev time. They're not having a return on their investment. But is that actually going to be the case? I think probably not. I think he's right. I think they'll continue on. But who knows? It could totally flop. I really don't know.
and we'll just blast through it in about 12 months or so. We can choose the pacing of expansions now after all. That's pretty cool, I guess. But as Classic goes forwards into Kata and beyond, at the same time, Vanilla has started to grow in a completely new way. You know, it's no coincidence that Season of Discovery happened when it did, just as Kata's about to come out. It keeps those more traditional Classic enjoyers with something to go and check out. And Season of Discovery has done very well so far. You've probably seen the recent chart and sub-count estimates that have followed in its wake, and well, Season of Discovery came out, sub-count line goes up.
So right now, if you look at Ironforge.pro, there are almost 2 times more characters raiding in Warcraft logs in Season of Discovery than there are in Classic Wrath. Almost 2 times more characters. And keep in mind, that's not individual people, it's characters. Though I actually think it's probably easier to raid on multiple characters in Wrath than it is in SOD, I think. Because keep in mind, like, the Wrath servers, they've been out for... People have had 5 or 6 years now, almost 5 years to level up characters. I think a lot of people have a lot of alts. Their GDKPs are still active in Classic Wrath, right? In SOD, there are no GDKPs. And so I think that, like, the number of characters each person is playing is actually higher in Wrath than it is in SOD. And still SOD has almost 2 times more characters on Warcraft logs. I think Classic Wrath is, at this point, keep in mind, it's the end of Wrath. It's kind of dead. People are waiting for Kata. It is dead, though. It's dead.
It just works.
SOD
There's clearly a huge demand for both vanilla content, as well as some changes being made to the game's base format that people are really invested in. Season of Discovery has also showed us that the player base has definitely changed by and large on certain topics too. Nowadays we have mega servers that can fit tens of thousands of players, not these smaller tight-knit communities that people would always go on about back in the day. Turns out on an MMO that people just want other people to play with. We have gold that's much easier to get, it's faster to level and so on. Though some of these things do make sense given it's a seasonal server and everything. Of course, Phase 3's out now, raising the level cap to 50, and we'll see how this plays out. At this point, part of me does just want to get to 60 and see how our class's full toolkit is supposed to play with everything Blizzard's planned, rather than...
Part of me feels like SOD doesn't really start until 60. We're sort of like in the beta phase of SOD right now. I think SOD really picks up at 60. I think so. Like, that's when the classes are complete, or almost complete at least. They could always add more runes later on, post 60, but Blizzard went on the record and said that at 60 and SOD, we're going to have multi-phasic, like raid releases. So, you know, for instance, when the level cap is raised to 60, next ram is not going to be available. Black Queen Layer is not going to be available. It's going to be Molten Core and Onyxia, presumably, and then maybe some other new raid that they add. But, you know, we're not going to be able to do all the raids on day one. So that means there's at least 5 phases at 60 once we get there, plus whatever other new content they want to add. Okay. All right, then.
Feeling
that means SOD is just kind of getting going.
As though some specs have bits missing, just so we have something to get later on. But then when we're 60, we have to go back to raiding Molten Core, Onyxia, BWL, and so on. And the existing level 60 raids, if I'm being honest, were not my favorite. Maybe we'll get the Season of Mastery changes in the game though, and they'll be a bit more interesting. I'll give them a go either way. At Blizzard though, I bet they've got more than enough to do on the Classic team, between getting Cataclysm in a state where it's working, as well as developing new stuff for Season of Discovery, and actively having to work on things such as class balancing on a regular basis. I would still like to see a standalone Classic server that adds new content into the game one day. Season of Discovery is definitely the closest we've got to a real Classic Plus experience so far, and
yeah, I think so. 7 months ago, when SOD first got announced at BlizzCon in November, there was this huge amount of like dialogue, people saying, oh well, SOD, it might not be exactly what we had envisioned for Classic Plus, but it's just going to be the Classic Plus beta. So they're going to do SOD, test things out, and then they're going to release the real Classic Plus 2 or 3 years from now. And SOD is the beta for the real Classic Plus. I don't think that's the case at all. I think there's nothing that is indicating that. I think that SOD, as far as Blizzard is concerned, is Classic Plus. I think we are playing Classic Plus right now, as far as Blizzard is concerned. I think this is pretty much what it's going to be. And like I said, we're just getting going. We're 5 months in, 6 months in, who knows? And there's at least another year of content for SOD, at a minimum another year, and it probably more than that, right? So hey, we'll see what happens.
And given its success, I expect to see more to come in terms of modified vanilla content. But changing that commitment from seasonal to permanent is a big undertaking.
I think, okay, so I know Season of Discovery is called Season, which has an implied end date. I think it is totally and completely possible that if people really love SOD and they continue to play SOD and player participation is really high as it is now, if that continues, I think they just keep on making SOD content. I think Season of Discovery, it could go on a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years as long as people are playing it. I don't think there has to be an immediate end date. I think they just keep on doing it. They just keep adding new shit as long as people like it.
And not without its own risks.
That's my guess.
Either. On seasonal servers, they can massively increase XP gain, give us Wrath of the Lich King and beyond abilities, and just make us all feel overpowered. And it's not, in many cases, how the game usually is with the pacing of vanilla at all. But we can just brush it off and say, yeah, but it's seasonal, so whatever, just have fun with it while it's here. Would Season of Discovery have been as well received if it was presented as a full-on standalone Classic Plus server? Maybe. Maybe not. But there are another group of players too, those who aren't on expansions, and those who don't really want all these changes to the original Classic format either, and those are the people still on Classic Era. In case you don't know, Classic Era were a bunch of servers made when vanilla was progressing onto TBC, and the idea was it was a place for people who prefer the vanilla version of the game to still have a home. And to this day, it's just vanilla that has received the Era treatment. TBC did not get Era servers, and there appears to be no plans for Wrath either.
So Classic Era is no changes vanilla, other than one change. And the change is 5 years of like hyper inflated economy. So if you go on the auction house, if you want to buy a flask of Supreme Power, it's going to cost like 900 gold. There's been so much GDKPing and botting and gold selling and gold buying and fly hacking. The economy is nuts. It's freaking crazy, which is kind of like funny in a way to see that, but it's not really a good. If you're someone that's never played vanilla and you're like, oh man, I want to play vanilla for the first time, I want to play classic for the first time, I would not recommend Classic Era. Classic Era is not the place to be if you're a first time classic guy. It's not a good fresh player experience at all.
And time is running out. And at first glance, it's not hard to see why. Classic Era was a disaster when it first came out. The servers were dead, and not in an exaggerated sense either. They were dead. There would be a handful of people online, if that, and auction houses at times had 0 items on.
But you know what's happened? As time has gone on, as we have gotten further and further away from that vanilla no changes sort of game, we had TBC, we had Wrath, we had SOM, we have SOD. Nostalgia kicks in, or that desire kind of kicks in, and people say, you know what? I want to go back and play vanilla again. And I do think this is kind of the point of the video. I do think that vibe, that feeling, I want fresh. Where's fresh? Fresh when? No changes vanilla. More and more and more people are starting to talk about that. You see that discussion. Chat, if there was a classic fresh 5 months from now, would you play it? Would you play classic vanilla fresh, no changes in the next 5 months? If they announced it, would you do it? Yes, yes, yes. Fresh, says the Whatever Podcast. Yes. I see a couple people saying no. 90% yes, 10% no. Fresh.
But it's grown over time. People have gone back to their old characters or sought to re-level in the old world without any new additions. It's not a huge population, to be honest, but it is consistent at least. And most importantly is that Era ended up serving its purpose, being a home for those who want a no changes classic. It just took a while for people to start missing it enough. And you know what? Hardcore servers would have never happened if Classic Era didn't exist. By the time the hardcore scene started to get really popular, we were in Wrath of the Lich King. Would people still have wanted to go back and play a hardcore game mode on Wrath servers with all the class and open world changes? A few perhaps, but it was that legacy of having challenging vanilla leveling that made people want to go back and undertake the challenge. And hardcore ended up being a pretty huge deal for a good few months. There's still a scene for it, of course.
Yeah, that that hardcore hype was building up. It was bubbling over for 2.5 years on the Classic Era servers. It was slowly coming to simmer, coming to boil until there were so many people doing Classic hardcore on the Classic Era servers that Blizzard said, okay, we're going to make official servers. It's true.
It's not like it's ever too late to start, and one day it'll probably have a resurgence because it's just always going to be there. And I've seen the odd sentiment here and there start to crop up about people missing TBC as well now. We're getting to that point where time has now gone by, but unlike
I've seen a couple of people say that. Really, Azimus is the most famous person, or like the biggest YouTuber content creator that is saying, hey, we need TBC back. I just don't care about TBC. If they release TBC again, I don't think that I would play that. Yes or no, chat? Would you play TBC? Classic TBC, no changes, if they announced it? Yes or no? And the entire chat, I'm going to say like maybe 85% no, 15% yes. Okay. And by the way, the only people saying yes are rogue players and warrior players because you want to get Warglaive of Azeroth. Okay, let's go.
Like vanilla, they can't go back. TBC's gone. If a big piece of Classic is re-releasing and preserving older expansion experiences, why are we once again leaving them in the past? That doesn't quite add up to me. And Wrath is soon to get the same treatment in having no Era realms. By the way, Icecrown Citadel came out over 5 months ago and still has about 175,000 active raiders. If 10% of those people carried onto a Wrath Era server, it would have the same raiding population as Classic Era. And I don't know whether Blizzard doesn't want another hosting dead server situation, it being logistically difficult to offer.
Okay, now that's a curious point he just makes, and I want to do some numbers. I'm sorry, this might be a little bit boring here, but I am fascinated by that idea. Okay, so when Classic Vanilla ended, there were 215,000 players raiding Naxxramas. The final week of Naxxramas was 215,000. How many people are doing Classic Era right now? Take a look here. I think it's demographics, Classic Era. There are 17K. Okay, so less than, what is that? Maybe like 7%? 7% or so, something like that, ballpark. And so right now there's 166K doing ICC right now. 100, okay, and let's just say it's the exact same ratio, okay? So 166,000, it's like times 0.07. You would have 11,000 people, maybe ballpark, something like that, give or take 1,000 or something, who knows. Is it worth it? Should Blizzard make Classic Wrath Era servers? You've had 2.5 or 3 months of straight ICC-induced decline, right? I don't know, maybe. I don't know. You know, I don't know. Keep in mind, I'm going to argue against myself here for a second, kind of. Classic Wrath, I'm sorry, Classic Vanilla Era has gone up and down over time. So, this is when Classic Era first launched. My webcam is kind of in the way here. Let me move this. This is Classic Era when it first launched. Not a lot of people. Remember that thing that WillE said when Classic Era came out? It was dead. No one cared about it. That's true. No one really cared. And then I guess there was a gap in the logging. No one really, like, I guess there was like a bug on the website, and then it came back. It continued to grow. It grow, and then it's here. What happened right here? This is November 2023. What happened? This is SOD launch. SOD siphoned off a good fourth of the Classic Era player base. No, this is SOD. SOD chopped off a fourth of the Classic Era player base. That's what happened. Very curious phenomenon.
For different expansions or whatever it is, but it seems as only vanilla is the expansion, or version of the game I should say, that's carrying on and on. And no, I don't think segmenting the player base is an issue here. These era servers are a niche thing to begin with, and for Blizzard, a sub is a sub. You might spend different amounts of time in different games doing different things, but somebody who subbed for Plunderstorm and somebody who raids Nax 40 on Classic Era are both subscribers. Overall though, despite me thinking as though the first 3 versions of WoW felt like a trilogy, keeping on releasing future...
Yeah, the whole like fragmentation of the community argument. As a player, you might have there might be some merit to it, but from Blizzard's point of view, I think they probably don't care a whole lot, right? Would you rather have? I'll try to make the numbers very easy. Would you rather have, if you're the game developer, you're trying to make money? Would you rather have 100 players on one game or 300 players split amongst four games, right? And so maybe it's like, 70 players here, 70 players here, 70 players here, 70 players there. They might have fewer population per game, but more people across. It's more money, right?
Future expansions is kind of the point of Classic in the first place in many ways. I reckon we get to Legion eventually, but I'm sure there is a longer term plan because at the end of the day, we're revisiting expansions at a faster pace than they're releasing. And over time, I think we're gonna keep speeding up. Classic Era is an...
I have a really hard time believing that many people would play Classic MoP or Classic Legion. I have a very, very hard time believing that. And the reason why, I think most of the people saying, man, I would love Classic MoP, I would love Classic Legion, I think those are people that are not currently playing Classic. Those are retail players. They're not interested in Classic Vanilla or Classic Wrath or TBC. It's people that are playing retail that are nostalgically looking back and saying, man, I would go back and play Legion. Let me ask you, do you think retail players right now actually would go back and play Legion every week? Do you think they would actually do that? Because there's a difference between saying, man, yeah, I would play that, versus actually doing it. I have a feeling like a lot of them wouldn't actually play. They might say they would play, but I have a hard time believing they would. But maybe I'm totally wrong. I could be totally wrong.
An idea which I think works just eventually, and it's a bit of a shame to not see it for TBC or Wrath. I wouldn't play them personally. I mean, even for Classic Era, outside of hardcore, I didn't really play it. But I think there would be a niche player base for them. I hope Season of Discovery and Hardcore as an alternative game mode have both made big impressions on Blizzard. Vanilla is the game with the biggest reach by a huge amount. It's the only pre-expansion version of World of Warcraft, and as such we can add content which builds on what exists, rather than releasing expansions and replacing everything. Though I am still hoping for something more permanent one day, but seasonal is a great testing grounds to see what works, and I've been super happy with it so far. I think given all the choices we have at the moment, Classic is doing just fine though, and outside of error servers not existing for old expansions being a bit of a shame, the future of Classic is looking very interesting. But those are just my thoughts at the moment and a few bits and pieces which I felt like talking about today. If you made it to the end, let me know.
Like he says, the future of Classic Vanilla, I think, is looking pretty good. I think that SOD has, at a minimum, another 12 months of compelling content, and then who knows what they do from there. They might add more, and it might be more than that. But at a minimum, 12 months of very compelling content that'll keep people engaged. We haven't even gotten to 60 yet. There's a lot of 60 stuff to do. And then I think, you know the meme where it's like, in case of emergency, break glass, and you break it and then there's something on the inside. I think as far as Blizzard is concerned, that's what Classic Vanilla No Changes is. If SOD dies, if no one cares about retail, if World of Warcraft, if the WoW scene is not looking very good, things are not looking very bright, we're doing fresh. Okay, we're bringing it out. We're doing fresh vanilla, no changes. And so this is not what you guys want to hear, because I know you guys want fresh so badly. So do I. I think Blizzard is not going to do Classic Vanilla No Changes fresh until SOD dies, because you know that they would like kind of cannibalize each other. I think SOD has to die before Blizzard even considers Classic Vanilla No Changes. I think it's not going to happen until then. So there you go.
What you think about the overall state of Classic in the comments down below, and thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you on the next one very soon.
Great video, WillE. Great video. Everyone, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And there's that. That was a great discussion. I'm happy we watched that. Really, really good.